All right. Well, it always takes an extra moment, no matter what we do. All right, everybody. Is this on? Okay, well, welcome everybody. And I'm going to cover a number of things tonight, very superficially, but happy to answer questions too as we go along. Let's see. I don't suppose this is going to work. I didn't think so. The old way. Okay, so that's what I'm planning on covering. Big thing about this time of year, we were talking about amongst ourselves that it's the time to trim. So I'll talk a bit about that. Things that you can take advantage of while you're trimming, and potentially even help us out for sales this year. A little bit about mulching, my opinions about mulching. Some things about adding plants to your landscape for the spring. And I want to talk a little bit about my wish list, which I know some of you might have seen on the website. Some of you are looking at it here. But anyway, so this is what my backyard looked like a couple days ago. So you can see that I have left a lot through the winter. And if you're new to all of this and you're not understanding why we don't trim everything off late in the fall to make it look nice, we're actually doing this very purposefully because it's good for wildlife habitat of all different kinds. There's oftentimes still seeds on those plants. So there's food for birds. There, if you leave your leaf litter and all of that other litter in place through the winter, there's a lot of places for insects to hide and be dormant for the winter. So there's a lot of reasons to leave all that. And somewhere around maybe Valentine's Day seems to be about the time that we all start thinking about trimming back those plants and getting ready for the new season. Yes. So some things that you can think about as you're getting ready to trim. Grab up those seeds that still are on the plants and either keep them, spread them. I was doing that just today. I started cutting back my fall aster and realized, oh, there's still a lot of seeds on this plant. And so I went and grabbed a paper bag and started collecting up seeds because I will keep them for later on to trade. So don't lose an opportunity to grab up some seeds and use them as you're trimming everything off. Okay, so I think we all, a lot of us have different ideas about how we like to do our trimming. A lot of the plants do quite well with being trimmed down to about 6 inches. That's my mealy blue sage from my front flower beds, and you can see kind of before and after. And you can see it's already coming up. So it was definitely time to trim. All right. Now, I don't always trim everything the same, and maybe some years I'll trim a little bit more severely than others, but this autumn sage was kind of struggling when I first moved to my new house. And so I haven't been trimming it back really severely. I've just been trimming out everything that looks dead, trimming off maybe the ends of the shrub to make it look a little bit more tidy, but not necessarily trimming it back severely. I will probably do that on some occasions. I just didn't this year. Same thing with my rock rose. I don't tend to cut that back severely, but rock rose is one of those plants that it likes to be a nice shrub, and it can be a nice shrub, but it tends to get really leggy. So to prevent it from getting really leggy, I trim all around it and get it a little bit more compact, so it's not leaning out over everything. So that's another good thing that you can do this time of year is, keep your plants from leaning into spaces that you don't want them. Okay, now, if you're doing this activity, this is a great way to take advantage of some of what you're trimming off, especially if you're still trying to either add to your own landscape, trade with others, prepare some things maybe for plant sale. So these are all the trimmings that were on the sidewalk after I did my rock rose about a year ago. And I looked at all those wonderful trimmings, and a lot of them have leaves on them and they're good live branches. So I decided to attempt potting some of them up. So here's what I did, and it worked out very well, by the way. Okay, so if I'm doing something with no roots at all on it, like a cutting, I like to use some kind of rooting hormone, and I just bought this at Lowe's, nothing fancy. It's just a little bitty tub of powder rooting hormone. So I made sure all of my little cuttings had more of an angular cut to them, because it gives them a little more surface area that you're going to put hormone on. So I gave them a nice little angular cut, dip them in my rooting hormone, and you can see the last picture, it has a fair bit on it. I always tap a whole bunch extra off. It doesn't really take very much at all to help them along. And then I tend to pot up in multiples, because not everything's probably going to survive. I can get a bunch of things started this way. Plus, I don't know, I just have a tendency to like the deeper pots, because if they do start growing some decent roots, they have a space to do that. And I have a lot easier time keeping these gallon-sized pots wet than I do 4-inch pots. So I tend to just use bigger pots as a rule. But anyway, that's what I did last year. And it was actually pretty successful. I got quite a few new little rock roses out of that. So it's something you can play around with, try your hand at, see if you're able to do it. And if you care to do it, if you want to add some more of something that way. Okay, so also you start looking over some of your beds this time of year. That's my Greg's Mist under some trees. And, they're going to come back every year, these lovely wildflowers. That's what we love about them. But the other thing about wildflowers is that they don't necessarily behave for you, right? They will be where they want to be. And sometimes they start really spreading. This nice population is starting to get some raggedy edges on it, and it's going to keep spreading out. Sometimes they're going to jump right out of the beds where you're keeping them, and now they're in maybe your mowed areas. But these are great candidates for digging up some plants. So so you can get them out of the ground right now when they're first coming up and they're very little. Get them into some pots, and again, maybe have some more for your own landscape, or some that you can trade, share, do whatever you want to do with. If you are moving plants, the ideal thing to do, it doesn't always work out that way, especially if you're moving them around in your own yard, it's going to be a lot easier to do, but try to include some soil. So that's my trowel laying on its side. I just dug this little snapdragon vine out, and I'm taking some of the soil from right where that plant was rooted, because that soil is full of various microorganisms fungi, all kinds of things that were supporting this plant. And when you move it to a new location, it'll be a lot more successful if you can bring some of its soil with it. Doesn't work out every time, but it is a desirable thing to do.
Question on the chat. Is now the time to trim willingness? How short you can trim it?
I'm about to trim that population that you saw. I just trim off whatever is dead down to my plants right now are probably, I don't know, inch or maybe slightly more than an inch tall. So I'm just going to take off what's dead typically and not the so that's a big stand of my mist flower, and I'm just going to take off all of that dead, and you can see little plants are already peeking their little heads up, and I'll just give them more room. So that grouping too isn't that tall, so I'm not going to be cutting very much off of it. All right, so bring some soil with you if you can at all. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. You're digging up a lot. The soil's just falling away. You know you're not going to get these plants from one spot to another with any soil on them. It's just not happening. I've gotten in the habit when especially if I'm digging up quite a lot or numerous of the same kind of thing, is I bought these two lovely, I guess they're dish pans, good old Walmart purchase. And I put a small amount of water, I don't know, couple inches of water, and a little bit of plant food. Now, typically your native plants do not need a whole bunch of fertilizer. I break that rule a little bit when I'm planting up something that's getting very stressed. So I will tend to add a little bit of help just because I know how stressed those are. And I leave them sit there while I'm digging everything up and I'm taking it back to my little planting area and prepping to get all these things into pots. So they sit in there for sometimes 20-30 minutes. And that's a nice thing for the plants. They've had a little bit of extra water, a little bit of plant food, and then I'll pour that water on the pots after I pot them up. But it just seems to help relieve some of that stress of taking these plants out of the ground. And especially since, again, like I said, taking up multiples like this, I kept little bits of soil, but I didn't keep a lot. So that's how I deal with that issue. And especially when we're digging up a whole lot of plants at once for a plant sale, I try to do some of that. When I pot up something like you just saw in the pans before, I also trim the plants back, and I know it doesn't show up really well here, but the picture on the left are the plants as they were, as I took them out of the ground and put them in the pots. And then the one on the right here is after I trimmed him. I probably should have even trimmed it a bit more. You really I tend to be probably more conservative than I should be. I'm working on it, but I know that the plants really do much better if you get rid of a lot of that leaf that they would have to try to support with a very stressed root system. So it does help if you trim them back. And then for sale or for sharing with somebody, it does help if you pot them like that for a month or so. For sale, we try to say actually 2 months, even better. And if it's something bigger like a shrub or a tree, probably even longer. Trees especially can take a fairly long time to recover. So make sure you give them plenty of time to recover. I know our first plant sale is at Dino Day, which is only about a month away. So that would be kind of soon if, you know, if you're just digging plants up out of the ground. But I'm planning on our biggest one being in May at our NLCP class. And that would give plants plenty of time to recover and start to look healthy again so that somebody would be interested in buying them. Oh, and by the way, with that root tone, we dug up some trees back in November here at Ty Preston, and those came with really no soil, and a lot of times we had broken some of the root system off just trying to get them out of the ground. I used that root hormone with those too, and some of them are looking very nice. Okay. Oh, and I even had a slide. I forgot I did that. So that's the same situation. If you want to save your rooting hormone a little bit, a lot of times I put it in the cap because I'm going to get that cap full pretty dirty with all those muddy plants. But yeah, these are some that we pulled up that we lost a lot of root with. So same situation. I don't know why that happened.
I said, oh, you know what you did? You bumped the wall. No.
Needs the,
Probably.
I won't touch it again. I won't touch it again. Gotcha. Okay. So anyway, same situation. Rooting hormone can help, especially if you end up losing a lot of the roots, just to give them a little bit of help as they're getting started. Okay, so yes.
If you're keeping them in your own garden, do you want to put them directly back into this, like back into the ground, or would you want to keep them out in potted?
It depends. And I've tried lots of different things, and the same thing doesn't always work with all kinds of different plants. If you feel like you've got a fair amount of the root system and you know it looks really good, and you got a nice big trowel full of soil, I have gone and put them directly in the ground, and it's worked out just fine. I give them a pretty good watering because it's still stressful, but I have done that, and it often does work. Yeah. I do a lot more of the potting and saving when I'm thinking it's going somewhere else than my yard. So this is one of my favorite slides. And I just drove by a whole bunch of trees, public trees, whatever, that obviously had just been mulched. But this is from AgriLife Extension. Be careful about the mulching, especially the mulching of trees. This whole mulch volcano, or even just a flat thing, it doesn't have to look like a volcano, but it shouldn't touch the tree trunk ever, ever, ever. It shouldn't touch the tree trunk. And I see that happen with the landscapers all the time. First of all, that's not even where the tree needs mulch, by the by. The tree could actually use that mulch out where the roots actually are, around where the canopy ends. So that's not really even serving a great purpose, but you're restricting oxygen exchange. You're creating a moist environment. And we all know how dangerous moist environments can be with your plants. So you're going to encourage insects to enter that mulch and to attack that tree. You're encouraging rodents to come in and chew on the bark. There is a possibility for fungal growth in that nice wet mulch. And if you do that around a very young tree, there's a very good chance that the root system of that little tree is going to grow right up into that mulch, because where is the easiest place to grow? into the mulch. So, you know, use your mulch wisely and maybe even sparingly. Another rule of thumb I use with mulch is that if you stick your finger down through that mulch and by the time you get to soil, it's dry, then your plants aren't getting very well watered when it rains, right? It's all in the mulch. So just think about that carefully. And I'm not a huge fan of this wood chip kind of mulch. To me, it just doesn't look like it belongs here, for one thing. So it's fine to use, but at least around my landscape, it would look funny. It wouldn't even look like it belonged. I prefer to take advantage of what's already there. And what looks normal around my landscape. So what looks normal around my landscape is leaves. So I go under some of my groupings of trees, especially my little live oaks, and those leaves have been falling for years. And you dig down in there and you get some nice, almost composted leaf mulch. So I pull up, you know, I scoop up buckets full of that and put it around when I feel like plants need a little help, a little protection. I also like decomposed granite. I again think it looks really natural here, but neither one of those do I put more than an inch or two deep. Really, just a little layer over the top just to minimize some of the evaporation that's going on and keep some of that water in place. But do what I would say, do what looks natural around your yard. You know, if you've got a bunch of leaves, then consider, instead of bagging them up and setting them out on the, you know, on the curb and going to buy mulch, use what you have. It'll look like it belongs there. Okay. Okay, so adding some plants. Obviously, plants get lost. We know we've had some really, you know, rough weather events this winter, and we've all been chatting about the plants that we've lost. So they're going to age out. Some of them aren't going to survive certain weather, and that's a pretty great opportunity to make some additions into your landscaping. So if you happen to have non-natives that you've been trying to change out, I always tell people, don't feel like that has to be an immediate thing that you have to take out every single non-native you have and have a bare landscape. Remove them as they die off, put in some nice natives, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, about some suggestions, but do it a little at a time. If you're thinking about adding plants, take a moment, look around your property, and take note of some of the characteristics of your property. And I bet it's not the same everywhere, right? Do you have shady spots? Do you have really bright sun spots? Is the soil same throughout? I know mine isn't. I have places that are really rocky and other places that almost would make you think I have dirt. So it does vary around. What's the terrain? Do you have any slopes? Do you have any depressions? All of those are going to represent different kinds of situations for your plants. And I'm guilty of going to various plant sales and just buying things off the cuff because, oh, I like that, I'm going to buy some of those. But then I do try now to take them home, sit them down for a little bit, and look around and figure out, okay, where do you belong? Where are you going to be happiest? And try to make sure that they go there. Have I made mistakes? Yes.
And make sure you label it.
Yeah, so sometimes I end up looking it up over, you know, several times over because I've already forgotten where it was meant to go. But yeah, I'm trying to get better about that. I was being a little free and easy with some of my plants when I was first getting them in the ground, and I've learned some lessons. Yeah, I've had to replace some. So make note before you run out there and try to dig a hole, which we all know that's the fun part too, digging a hole. Yeah. And you might want to think about what your goal is too. Are there certain things that you're trying to attract to your yard? Do you have a purpose in mind? So if you're looking for birds to be in your yard, then you might want to make sure you have some nesting sites, which is going to usually involve some trees, and some good food, a variety of seeds, a variety of insects. Boy, that's been one of the toughest sells, I feel like, going around talking to people about natives. We all have this idea that, you know, insects are bad, or we get this, you know, stuck in our head that insects are bad, and they're necessary. So embrace your insects. They're good for your plants. And I've never had any insect eat every bit of a plant that I have. Well, if you're just going to plant one, it might happen, but typically they don't do that anyway. If you're looking for hummingbirds, then you're going to want to have some tube-shaped flowers in your landscape. If you're looking for butterflies, then it's a variety of flower types. Some of them like more flatter flower heads, like your asters. Some of them also like tube-shaped flowers. Boy, the big one is my flame acanthus, and that is a huge shrub. And the middle of the summer, there's not a day that goes by that it's not covered in bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, because a lot of them love it. And of course, you might want to think about host plants for certain kinds of butterflies. We all talk about milkweeds, but there's plenty of other good host plants out there for various butterflies. And now there's an increasing number of books out there. And thanks to Joel, we have a wonderful resource list on our website that you can check out as well. But think about what you want to do with your landscape. All right, I also thought I'd take a moment and talk about planting trees, because it's still good tree planting time before we get really hot. It was better maybe a month or two ago, but it's still okay. Because we still have hopefully get some lower temperatures, not in the next couple days, but still get some lower temperatures and maybe some rain. Would be lovely. Okay, so a couple quick tips if you haven't planted a lot of trees around here, and you're going to find that you need some kind of tool. My husband finally decided a jackhammer was the answer. It works. You need the hole to be of an appropriate size. Doesn't have to be super deep. Notice we only made it as deep as the pot is deep. So it doesn't have to be super deep, but it helps if you make it about twice the diameter of that pot of that tree you're putting in there, because you want those roots to have places to go. And especially, you can see how rocky that terrain is right there. And so just loosening up some of that rock will hopefully help. But make sure the hole is nice and wide. Prepare your plant. That's a stock picture, but and hopefully you're not buying trees that look that bad when you take them out of the pot. That's why I like to stick with little bitty pots, 1 gallon, maybe up to 3 gallon. I know a lot of these nurseries sell them very, very big. That's when they typically look like that. The little ones will catch up and they won't be so pot bound. But I fill my hole with water, get that plant prepared, get the root ball kind of loosened up a bit. Stick it in there make sure the plant's at the correct height in the hole. So for y'all here, I will do that in a second. This is about where the roots end, right there. So I'm trying to get the soil right about up to where I can see the roots are ending, and you can see the transition to the shoot portion. And this is a good time to add some fertilizer if you're going to. Anyway, for those of you at home. So this spot right here is about where the roots ended. So that's as high as I would put my soil. Okay, some resources, and a lot of you already know about a lot of this. The NICE program always has some good suggestions, so you can go to our website for that. If you want some information about specific plants, going to wildflower.org can give you some good information if you have some idea of the plant you're looking at. If you're looking for some good places to buy plants and you're new to the area, those are our participating nurseries. So we have Canyon Lake Ace Hardware, South Texas Growers, and King Feed, which is somewhat newly opened, that are all really good sources of native plants for this area. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about before we finish up tonight are plant sales, and what I'm asking for, and how I thought through what I'm asking for. So I know this is it's almost readable up there, and for you at home, and this is on the website, so you don't have to attempt to read this, but this is my wish list for this year, and it's more than this page, it's several more. But here's what I did this year. I had a couple different thoughts about the plants I was asking for. One is, I went through a couple different books and I tried to get a handle on what the region is that this plant is particularly, suited to. So that's what the numbers are. 1 is Edwards Plateau, 2 is Blackland Prairie, 3 is 2 is Blackland and Edwards Plateau, because we have a lot of us folks kind of straddling a little bit. 3 is Blackland Prairie alone, and 4 is just Texas. So, there's a lot of plants out there that they are not necessarily indigenous to Texas. They tend to have a much wider range, but they have places in Texas, specifically here. I try not to list them if they're not suited to this part of Texas, but my number 4 just means that they live in a number of places in Texas, but also a lot of them live in many other states as well. Now, the other thing that I started getting interested in and would like to point out for my list is, and I should have brought the book and I forgot, but the Trees, Vines, and Shrubs, is it Weber? Yeah. Book has a couple pages towards the front of the book of plants that they consider of high priority, which means that their numbers are dwindling, and it's something that we should probably consider planting some more of because their numbers are getting low. Or maybe it's a little bit specific to certain areas, but now if it just has 1 asterisk, it is what they considered a priority plant. And I kept looking up other sources for priority plants, and it just keeps taking me right back to that one book. So there might not be a whole lot of good information out there. And that book has been published a few years ago. But the ones with 2 asterisks are they considered high priority. So they're even more at risk, I guess, plants. So think about that. If you look around your property and you realize you have any of these that are priority plants and you have any that you would consider extras, to me, those are ones that would be nice to start offering to the public, because those are ones that they're not likely to find at a nursery. And sometimes they're just odd ones that come up. I know I have some that are happy in my yard and I don't see in a lot of other places. So those are trees, shrubs. That's perennials. And there's not really any priority plants in there. Well, and that list is rather short in the book that I took that from. So I don't really have any good information on a lot of these perennials, but when you get to the vines, there's actually a number of vines that are from their list, because it was a book that includes vines. I know I get Virginia creeper in my yard. I get the bracted passion flower that comes up in my yard. So you can always use your books. Try your iNaturalist if you play around with iNaturalist. If you're seeing something new and you're not sure what it is, there are some very interesting little plants that sometimes show their little heads and maybe don't come around all the time. Anyway, but that's my whole list. Is it a perfect list? No. This is a list that I took over, and I have taken a few things off of it. I have added a few things to it, and I've shifted things around a little bit. But I actually added a vine, penciled one in to my list that's back there that comes up in my yard that is a Texas native. It's called a snapdragon vine. So that list does, does evolve and change over time. And if you have something that you think might be of interest and you're pretty sure it's a native here, but it's not on my list, I'm happy to entertain it and, see if we might be able to offer it. Again, I'm trying to stay away from offering plants that you can find very easily at many nurseries. The more unusual plants we can offer, I think the more interesting it is. At least that's the way I feel about it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a bunch of kidneys, we have a big one and then we have
Mm-hmm.
a real big. So we should dig them out, pot them up, and see what they look like in May, basically, because right now they look like dead sticks.
Mm-hmm. If you are willing to give them a try, that would be great. And they may, there's a good chance we'll end up doing at least some bit of a sale in the fall. We're hoping to do another NLCP class in the fall because they may not look good for a while, right? As trees, but yeah, if you're willing to give things a try, please don't be afraid to. Yes.
Just be a little careful with how easy they come up. I told her I had a bunch of little cedar elms in my place, and I popped those up 6 or 7 years ago. It took me 45 minutes to get one cedar elm out of my limestone. It was 6 inches tall. So some of them are easier to get out than other ones, but if you're easy to get out, go for it.
Well, I think we've moved some before.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's stunted them, like they have maybe grown an inch in 3 years since we moved.
Right.
So it's like it takes them a while.
Okay.
To shop.
So we had a couple comments about digging up little trees like cedar elms, and you said kidney wood, right? And yeah, it's not always a successful venture. I've got some flame leaf sumac that I've tried digging up, little tiny ones, and yeah, I may not get anything usable for a year or two. I've done the same with some cedar elm, and they seem to be taking a while. So some plants may recover quicker, may do better being dug up than others. Some may just end up being a failure. And, which is why I still entertain purchasing plants to some degree, especially for a bigger sale, because digging plants up isn't always successful. I try to do as much as I can because that's free. All I spent was a few dollars in potting soil. So I try to do, as much of that as I can. Yes.
With the potting soil, what is the best that you should use for natives as far as like what kind of soil you would buy?
I use the cheapest one I can find, usually. And I typically use a simple soil, and I almost always have some decomposed granite on hand. And that's something I like to mix in, something that will help keep it loose. So there's various things that you could put in your potting mix to keep it from getting too compacted. But I do not spend a lot of money doing that. And a lot of times I just dig up soil where I can. Do we have any questions from Zoom? No? Yes.
I quit digging in my limestone to plant trees. I had a number of them when I first got here, doing that, rock quarrying the limestone and everything like that. And I finally just decided I'm just going to start mounding up a bunch of dirt and planting it down in the dirt. And there's limestone, and I can crack the limestone, so get a fissure so they'll drain better or something. I'll do that. But I've just been trying lately, just 4 or 5 bags of mulch around there and up in the dirt, and then plant the tree in there and see. And the last number of ones I put in there seem to be doing better. My bur oak, which I did the first way, has never gotten very tall, and I think it may be dead now. But this year.
So Joel was mentioning that he's given up trying to dig into limestone with his pike or any other tool. And I've had the same issue on a couple occasions where I realized after the fact that all I really did was dig a bowl.
Yeah.
And there was no place for the roots to go, and it was not successful. So he's
also lucky that ER visit my cat left.
yeah, that too. Well, and the jackhammer is kind of heavy. But yeah, so a lot of people like Joel have gone to just planting on the top of the rock and adding mulch to create a place for the plant to grow. And that's another approach around here. Some places the rock shelf is pretty thick. Yeah, you should come see our water feature. That a hole that took 2 months to dig into the solid rock. And you see those on videos, oh, we're going to put in a water feature in a weekend. Ah! They haven't done it here. Yes.
We've been very successful at growing fir and chicken from acorn.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 years they're only this tall. So how tall do they have to be in the plant family? How many years is it?
So we have sold trees that are only maybe a foot tall. Yeah. That are in like maybe a 1 gallon pot, maybe slightly bigger. And in my opinion, that's a good tree to buy, because you're going to have so much harder time digging a big enough hole for that bigger potted tree. And it's usually very stressed. And if you've ever listened to Doug Tallamy, he swears by planting acorns or things like that they will surpass that big giant tree that you spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars for and put in the ground. So some of it is just changing people's ideas, but at our plant sales, we have previously sold some trees that were only about a foot tall and in gallon pots. And you're right, it would take several years to get a tree into a bigger pot. But
I'm discouraged trying to plant mountain laurels.
Mhm.
Because they have that long taproot.
exactly,
You know, in a year they grow, they're 2 inches tall.
yep,
If they go straight in the ground, it's much better.
exactly. So yeah, do what works for your yard, do what's easy for you, and don't be afraid to just plant seeds. It's a good approach. Anybody else have any? Yes.
Could you remind this group and also the Zoom group that I haven't looked at Joel's reference in quite some time, so I don't really remember what books are on there. But I know the library has quite a nice collection of reference books because the chapter gave them so many. So can you remind them,
Mhm.
you don't have to go out and buy them. You can go online and probably borrow them from the library. He'll remind them.
Okay, so Susan's reminding us that there've been a lot of good reference books that have been donated to the library by the chapter, and they're available here. So if you want to avoid running out and buying a bunch of different reference books, take the time to look at what the library has to offer first, and then decide what you liked. Yeah, that's a good idea. Try it first. That is